I just got back from L.A. where I was narrating a documentary about F. Scott Fitzgerald, and with a special focus on his career as a screenwriter. And it brought me to think about my own only slightly less depressing career as a screenwriter. You may not even know that I had one. While I was there, I had dinner with my close friend and 80s doppelganger, Bret Easton Ellis. And Bret has actually moved to LA. He left New York about 5 or 6 years ago to become a full-time screenwriter. A move that I found and still find a little bit inexplicable. And I asked him about his day once we finally sat down and started drinking copiously. Actually, I was a little worried about him because he was not drinking as much as usual. It seemed like a bad sign, but he described his day to me, and it was basically full of meetings. The final one of which was with the CW, which seemed especially depressing. And it reminded me of all of the meetings that I had been to when I was a sort of aspiring Hollywood screenwriter. And I think that was one of the reasons that I finally decided to stop. Another reason was because everybody knows that the writer is at the very bottom of the social hierarchy in Hollywood, and that's not a lot of fun. At the top of the social hierarchy is the talent. Now, you might imagine, and at least I hope you imagine, that writers are talent, have talent, at least many of us, some of us, but not in Hollywood. In Hollywood, the talent is the actors, and they're the people who are paid to speak the words written by Bret Easton Ellis and myself and other untalented people. But my screenwriting career started I thought kind of brilliantly, certainly unexpectedly. I was working in a liquor store in Syracuse, New York. I was studying for my master's degree at the time in killing time. I got a phone call at the liquor store, which of course I at first thought was a joke. It was a man named Michael Bessman. Said he worked for Barry Diller at Paramount, and that he or they or perhaps some underpaid assistant had read my then unpublished novel, Bright Lights, Big City, and that they were extremely interested in optioning it, in flying me out to Hollywood, and in making me rich and famous. And I still kind of thought this was a joke. I mean, it turned out my girlfriend had sort of forwarded them on and given the number of the liquor store. And I also I was also trying to fend off this homeless man who was trying to, pay me for his bottle of Wild Irish Rose with a bunch of change. But I thought I felt that maybe he really was from Hollywood because he kept calling me Babe and he asked if I could come to Los Angeles that weekend. And I was racking my brain. I was thinking, there's no fucking way I can afford a ticket to Los Angeles. And I finally admitted this. And he said, "No, you idiot. We'll fly you first class." And that seemed fun. And he said, "Where do you want to stay?" And I'd never stayed in Los Angeles. I'd never been to Los Angeles, and I certainly didn't know where to stay. So I played it kind of coy, and I said, "Well, what would you recommend?" And he said, "How about the Chateau Marmont?" And I said, "Is that good?" And he said, "Is it good? Well, John Belushi died there." And so that was the first time that I felt like maybe somebody actually had read my unpublished novel, which, in case you don't know, it involves a lot of illegal substances. So I flew to Hollywood. Unfortunately for me, the day I arrived in Hollywood, it was reported in all the trades that Paramount had basically exploded, and Barry Diller and Jeffrey Katzenberg and the whole team that had flown me out there all kind of left en masse. On the upside, though, I did walk out to the pool, and there were these two topless girls at the pool of the Chateau Marmont. So I immediately ran to my bungalow and came back, and the girls were gone, but Sting was in the pool. And so the phone rang, and I didn't know what to do. There's a phone beside the pool, and Sting finally got up, looked at me, and he got out and answered the phone. And he said, "It's for you." And I thought, wow, Sting knows me. It was only later that it occurred to me that there were only two people at the pool. But even though my Paramount team was gone, I discovered that in giving my novel to ICM, I had inadvertently inherited agents in Los Angeles, and they arranged meetings for me with other people, including Sidney Pollack and Jerry Weintraub. And before I knew it, after I flew back to Syracuse, I had a deal. Not only was my screenplay, was my book optioned, but I was hired to write the screenplay, and it was amazing. It was great. So the next thing I knew, I was flying out to Los Angeles once again, first class, to meet with Sidney Pollack, and I got to the airport, and a guy had a sign with my name on it, and there was this huge limo waiting for me. I mean, you know, it probably would not have fit in this room. And I drove back to the Chateau Marmont. Went back to Syracuse, and a few weeks later, I sent them a draft of a screenplay. And very quickly, I got a response. Sidney Pollack called me and said, "Jay, brilliant, you know, buy a tuxedo, we're going to the Oscars. Well, we just got a few problems with the first act, so, you know, you come back, we'll have a meeting." So I flew back, and this time there was a guy with a sign, and he had a town car. And it didn't smell very good, but anyway, back to the Chateau Marmont, more meetings. Joel Schumacher had been hired as the director. I flew back and wrote another draft, which my agent told me was not actually a draft because they would have to pay me for another draft. So my agent informed me that it was a polish, not a draft. So much later, I got a call from Sidney Pollack's assistant saying, you know, we get some trouble with the second act. Why don't you come back? So I flew back to LA, and nobody was waiting for me. I called the studio, and they said, "Well, why don't you take a cab and we'll reimburse you?" And that was pretty indicative of where the project, or at least my involvement in it, was headed. Joel Schumacher informed me that I was fired. Very sad. Went back to Syracuse. That's really sad. And I was very happy when I learned a few months later that Joel Schumacher had been fired. A lot of screenwriters came on board and left. Eventually, somebody named Joyce Chopra was shooting Bright Lights, Big City in New York City. And I felt kind of bereft. There I was up in Syracuse. This is kind of like Eastern Russia with shopping malls. And there they were filming my baby down in NYC. And apparently, though, when Sidney Pollack and the big boys saw the rushes the first couple of days, there's some talk that she forgot to take the lens cap off. But anyway, regardless, it wasn't what they wanted. Now they have Michael J. Fox, they have Kiefer Sutherland as the stars. It's a big production. And if you can imagine, in the middle of, after one weekend, they fired Joyce Chopra, looked around for who was available. A guy named James Bridges, who did Urban Cowboy and the China Syndrome, was available. He immediately jumps in, reads all the screenplays, and he decides that my first draft was the best one. I'm back on the project. They call me. I fly down, meet Michael and Kiefer Sutherland, and so I start going to the set every day. At night, Michael and myself go out and reenact many of the scenes in the book. I don't know how he made any of his calls, but somehow he did. I thought it was going to be a great movie. In the end, I hope that many of you haven't seen it. I think it was a combination of, you know, Michael J. Fox was best known for this family ties role, and a young, clean-cut Republican. His fans did not want to see him with a straw up his nose. My fans did not want to see Michael J. Fox in that role, and also, frankly, I knew very little about screenwriting. At any rate, I continued to write screenplays. People, believe it or not, people were really starting to pay me for this. I even did one with, I did an adaptation of Fitzgerald's Babylon Revisited. But then one day a scrappy little outfit called HBO called me up. And they wanted to try their hand at feature films. And they asked me to write a movie called Gia, and about the supermodel Gia Karanji, who died of AIDS. And you know, you can imagine that conversation. Let's see, supermodel nightclubs, 80s. It sounds like a job for Jay McInerney. And indeed it was. And I'm very proud of that script to this day. But I have to say that its success had something to do with a young actress named Angelina Jolie. This was her first big role. And frankly, she took her top off very early in the movie, and either of her breasts are more poetic than any of the lines that I wrote. But it was a hit. That's my last produced screenplay. I wrote a bunch more, but eventually I realized that I was a novelist. You know, being a screenwriter, if making a movie is like throwing a party, the screenwriter isn't the host; he's the caterer. You know, and as a novelist, I'm the ruler of my own kingdom. So I was happy to give it up. Also, nobody was asking me anymore. But then one day I got a call from my agent. He said, "How would you like to be? There's a part that's been written for you in Gossip Girl," and I knew that the producer was a fan of Bright Lights. And so I couldn't say no because, first of all, it's my daughter's favorite show. And I like Josh Schwartz. And also Josh was promising to remake Bright Lights, Big City, which he still may do. This became a recurring role, and it was really kind of fun, and I started to take it seriously. And I joined the Screen Actors Guild. And recently I was on Law & Order SUV. I guess everybody's been on that. But anyway, I started having fun with this. And a few months ago, the BBC called up and they said, "How would you like to narrate a documentary about F. Scott Fitzgerald?" And I was thrilled. I'm a huge Fitzgerald buff. So we flew out to LA. And at one point, between scenes, I said to the cameraman, who's very funny and raw, I said, "I'm really kind of thirsty." And he said, "Oh, the fucking talent is thirsty." And I suddenly thought, wow, I'm the talent, you know? And it's just like, I have become one of those people who, one of those divas who is paid to read lines that other people write and is spoiled rotten for it. You know, I've become like my friend Brooke Shields. Well, not that talented, but it was, I'm a starlet, you know, 2/3 of the way through my life. I'm the talent. And I couldn't help thinking about poor F. Scott Fitzgerald, who was actually asked by the producers of This Side of Paradise whether he and Zelda would star in the production of This Side of Paradise. They didn't, obviously, but one can only wonder what would have happened. And in case you're wondering about my life, next month I'm flying to LA to shoot a couple of days on a movie called The Truman Syndrome. Apparently there are many people who believe that they're in a reality TV show. And this is about a guy who believes that he is, and I am his best friend. and I get to make out with Heather Graham and seduce her. Or at least I did until this week. It looks like there might be a problem with her schedule. So please wish me well. Thanks.